My ex walked out on me chasing what she called real love, and not long after, she told her new husband I'd be footing the bill for his kids too. Yeah, let me rewind and lay it all out. 12 years ago, Marisol and I called it quits just after our twins were born. We hadn't even been dating that long, maybe around 17 months, when she found out she was pregnant. We both kind of freaked out and figured, hey, maybe we should give this a real shot for the sake of the kids. You probably know how that thinking goes. You convince yourself that a baby will somehow anchor the relationship, like things will just fall into place because there's a family involved. Looking back, I can admit we were never really right for each other. We had a few decent moments, sure, but nothing deep or lasting. Still, when she got pregnant, I thought maybe we could power through. Truth is, we were more like oil and water. But for the sake of the twins, we gave it everything we had. For a time, things were okay. We had the usual disagreements, nothing explosive. We were managing the co-parenting thing without tearing each other apart. Then she met someone new. A guy she thought she could really build a future with. And I understood that. She wanted something fresh, something better than what we had. To her credit, she was upfront about it. We both agreed it made more sense to go our separate ways. I wasn't crushed or anything. Truth is, the relationship was on shaky ground anyway. All in all, the breakup went as smooth as breakups go. We eased into a co-parenting groove after that. Things actually ran pretty well. As well as you can expect when two people are raising kids from different homes. We split the time pretty evenly, kept the focus on our kids, and managed to parent together without too much drama. We both agreed on one thing: the twins didn't need to be caught in any crossfire. They spent time with each of us, and we never involved lawyers or child support. We just divided things equally. About 4 years later, Marisol started seeing the man who's now her husband. This wasn't the guy she dated right after we split. He was someone entirely new. Here's the kicker: he had a daughter the same age as our twins. Marisol mentioned him and said things were getting serious. I was cool with that. I wanted to be supportive for the kids' sake. I didn't mind another father figure being around if it meant more love and stability for my twins. But things started getting weird when she casually floated the idea of including his daughter in everything we did with our own kids. Like she just dropped it into conversation: wouldn't it be great if we did stuff as one big family? At first, I thought it was just her way of blending the families. I get that. But then it started to feel like she was nudging me to treat her stepdaughter like one of my own. Now let me be clear here. I've got nothing against the girl. She's just a kid caught in the middle of all this. But Marisol acted like, since we all shared a connection through the twins, I was now responsible for including her stepdaughter in every outing, every event, everything I planned with my kids. When she brought it up the first time, I told her I understood she wanted the kids to feel united, but I wasn't about to play dad to her husband's child. I already had my hands full being a present and involved father to my own twins. Still, she didn't let up. I tried not to let it get under my skin. Co-parenting is already a tightrope walk, trying to juggle your kids' needs while keeping the peace with an ex and their new family setup. But it just kept escalating. Eventually, she started expecting me to babysit her stepdaughter anytime I had our twins. If I was taking the kids to the zoo or the park for the weekend, she'd call and ask if I could bring her stepdaughter along too. I didn't mind every once in a while, but it turned into a pattern. It became something she expected, not something she asked for occasionally. And I'm not against helping here and there, but I never agreed to be a third parent to a child who isn't mine. That didn't sit right with me, or with my twins, honestly. It got to the point where anything special I did for my kids somehow turned into a conversation about the other kids at her house. I couldn't just plan something for the twins anymore without it becoming this big deal. I'd buy them gifts or organize a fun day, and she'd come at me saying it wasn't fair if her stepdaughter wasn't treated the same way. One time, she actually got upset that I didn't spend as much money on her stepdaughter's gift as I did for our twins. That was my breaking point. I had to put my foot down. I told her I was focusing my time, my energy, and my resources on my own kids. Period. Of course, she didn't take that well. She accused me of being selfish and unsupportive of her whole family. She had this dream of one big, blended family, but I hadn't signed up for that. I told her I wanted my twins to feel loved and included, sure, but that didn't mean I had to extend the same treatment to kids that weren't mine. She didn't love hearing that, but we kept things just civil enough to keep co-parenting from falling apart. Since then, though, it's been more like parallel parenting than true co-parenting. We stick to our time, keep our plans separate, and don't do joint activities anymore. We don't blend the kids or coordinate anything beyond what's absolutely necessary. It's cleaner that way, less stressful. It gives me space to focus on being a dad to my twins without all the added pressure. Still, every now and then she tries to guilt-trip me like I'm supposed to feel bad for not helping raise every kid under her roof. And over time, things at her place have only gotten more tangled. She and her husband had a baby together. Then they took in his nephew. So now she's got our twins, a stepdaughter, a stepnephew, and a new baby all under one roof. She tries to run things like it's one big happy family. And hey, good for her. But I've made it crystal clear my focus is on my twins. That's where my responsibility begins and ends. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Just when I think we've hit a stable routine, something else pops up. But I've stayed firm on my boundaries. And I honestly don't think it's unreasonable to want to pour my time and effort into the two kids who are actually mine. Supporting her as a mother? Sure. Being expected to play stepdad to her entire household? That's another story. And now here we are, with things really starting to spiral out of control. The more kids she's brought into the picture, the harder it's been to keep my boundaries clear. We used to have a decent balance. I did my part as a dad and stayed out of her home life. But her expectations just kept growing, like every few months there was some new situation where she wanted me to step in and help. Her stepdaughter. Her husband's nephew. Their new baby. It's like every time they added someone new to the family, she expected me to pick up part of the load too. Then came this whole mess with the school trip. Now, the school my twins attend is on the smaller side, which means it combines different age groups into the same classrooms. Because of that, they're in class with both their stepsister and their stepcousin. Strange setup, sure, but if it works for the school, I've got no problem with it. What I didn't see coming was how it would spiral into another round of arguments with Marisol and her husband, this time over who should be paying for what. See, this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill field trip. It was a big one. The kids were going to some interactive museum, the kind with hands-on exhibits and creative workshops, really engaging stuff. It wasn't cheap either. But my twins were thrilled about it, and I figured it'd be one of those things they'd remember for a long time. I could afford it, no problem, so I paid for both of them and mentioned it to Marisol, thinking she'd be happy they'd get to go. Yeah, not even close. As soon as I brought it up, she went quiet. Then out of nowhere, she tells me it wouldn't be fair unless the other kids in her household could go too. At first, I honestly thought she was kidding. I mean, how could she seriously expect me to cover the cost for the other two kids? But nope, she was dead serious. She started going off about how it wouldn't be right for our twins to enjoy some fancy trip while the others had to stay home. I did my best to stay calm. I explained that I was covering the cost for my own kids because, well, they're my responsibility. I even suggested she and her husband could maybe save up or do a fundraiser if it was really that important. But then she hits me with this guilt trip about how the other kids will feel left out, how they'll be devastated watching my kids go and not being included. Suddenly, it was like the fate of their entire household harmony depended on whether I paid for everyone's tickets. And that's when her husband decided to jump in. He starts talking about how I was creating division by treating the kids differently. Now, I'm not against treating kids fairly, but let's be real, those other two. They're not mine. I don't owe them anything. I looked him dead in the eye and asked, why exactly is it my job to pay for every child under your roof? And the way he stared at me, you'd think I just said something outrageous. Then he launched into this whole dramatic speech about how I was sabotaging their attempt at family unity. Seriously? Look, I get it, no kid wants to feel excluded. But there's a difference between empathy and financial responsibility. And I'm not the father of every child in that house. Marisol chose this path. She chose this family. And I'm not going to let anyone guilt-trip me into picking up their tab just to maintain some image of a blended home. What really got to me, though, was when they started making me out to be the bad guy. They said I was cruel and that I damaged the kids' relationships over this. Suddenly, I wasn't just a dad trying to do something fun for his twins, I was the villain tearing their little modern family apart. That's when I had to speak up. I told them flat out, I'm not responsible for making sure every kid in their household gets equal treatment. This trip? It was a special moment I wanted to share with my twins. It was during my parenting time, and I wasn't about to cancel it or turn it into some group package deal. Of course, Marisol kept pressing the issue. She said if our twins went without the others, it would send a message that they were more important and that I should care about how that would make everyone feel. Her husband even chimed in again, talking about long-term resentment and how it would all be on me. By that point, I was done with it. This wasn't about unity. It was about them trying to pass off their financial choices to me. And they weren't broke either, they've got solid jobs. If sending their kids on this trip really mattered, they'd figure it out. I'm not about to stretch my budget thin so they can keep up appearances. The whole conversation just kept looping, the same guilt, the same pressure. I stood my ground. Told them I wasn't responsible for their money problems and I wasn't going to let them twist this into some moral failure on my part. We ended it there, but I could tell by the look in Marisol's eyes, this wasn't the last I'd hear of it. I walked away from that conversation feeling pissed off and honestly just drained. I couldn't wrap my head around how doing something nice for my own kids had turned into this big morality debate. Like I was suddenly the bad guy because I didn't want to bankroll everyone else's kid. It's exhausting. Feels like I'm always one decision away from a full-blown fight. I just wanted my twins to have a cool experience. Apparently that's too much to ask these days. Anyway, I figured that would be the end of it at least for now. I thought I'd been clear enough, made my point, stood firm, and that Marisol and her husband would back off. But nope. Turns out they had more to say. And what came next? That really caught me off guard. A few days after the argument, I get a message from Marisol saying she wants to meet up and talk. Right then, I knew it wasn't going to be a warm, fuzzy coffee chat. But I agreed better to hash it out face-to-face than keep playing ping-pong with texts. We picked a small diner halfway between our places. I get there, and the moment she walks in, I can tell she's got something rehearsed. That look on her face? All business. She sits down and doesn't waste time. Starts off with, "I don't think you're understanding the situation." And I'm sitting there thinking, no, I get it perfectly. I'm paying for my twins. That's it. But I kept my mouth shut and let her talk. She starts this long speech about the bigger picture and how the school trip wasn't just about a single event, it was about laying the foundation for how we're going to approach things as a family moving forward. I guess she thought if she framed it as some grand parenting philosophy, I'd cave. She started laying it all out like the school trip was just the beginning. According to her, this was only the first of many situations to come: future school events, family gatherings, even full-on vacations, and we needed to be aligned on how all the kids were treated. Equal treatment, she said, across the board. And I'm sitting there thinking, hold up, is she really about to suggest I should help pay for family vacations for kids that aren't even mine? But I stayed quiet. I kept my reactions in check because I knew if I got worked up, it would only add fuel to the fire. Then she circled right back to the fairness card. She said that if our twins get opportunities and the other kids don't, it's going to build resentment. That those other kids will start to feel excluded. And she even went so far as to say it could permanently damage the relationships between all the kids. I was just sitting there trying not to roll my eyes. I mean, they're already from different families with different parents and totally separate situations. Why is it suddenly on me to bridge that gap? When she finished, I calmly told her I understood her concern, but that those kids aren't mine and they're not my responsibility. I reminded her that we've been doing this parallel parenting thing for a while now, her household, her rules. My time, my rules. But apparently that arrangement doesn't work for her anymore. And that's when she really dropped the bomb. She looked at me and said, if you truly cared about the kids' emotional well-being, you'd want to support the whole family, not just your twins. She went on and on about how I should be stepping up for all the kids to show I'm committed to the family's overall stability. I almost laughed. Not to be rude, but it was just so absurd. Since when did being a good dad to your own kids mean taking on everyone else's too? At that point, I could feel my patience slipping. I told her, look, I do care about my kids. That's why I'm willing to go the extra mile for them. But I'm not about to let you guilt-trip me into paying for kids I didn't father. She didn't like hearing that at all. She got defensive real fast, accusing me of being selfish and short-sighted. She said I wasn't thinking long-term about how this would affect the kids as they grow. So I shot back, how is it selfish to take care of my own children? You and your husband decided to bring more kids into your household. That's your choice, not mine. And right then, as if on cue, her husband showed up. I don't know if it was planned or just bad timing, but there he was walking in like he was about to rescue the whole situation. He barely even looked my way. Just walked right up to our table and started talking to Marisol like I wasn't even there. Then he sits down and jumps right into it, saying, I don't think you're being fair. We're trying to build a family here, and your actions are putting up walls. I just looked at him for a second, wondering if he really thought I'd be buying into this "we're all one big family" talk, when what he really meant was, open your wallet. So I told him plainly, I'm here for my twins. That's my role. That's what I committed to. But you don't get to act like I'm some kind of extra parent to everyone else. And then he drops this gem, well, if the kids end up hating each other, that's on you. You're the one creating division. That did it. I told him straight, you're the one trying to push me into pretending these other kids are mine. I didn't ask for this chaos, you brought it into your own house. I just want to take care of my kids. That's it. Honestly, I didn't care how cold it sounded. It felt like the two of them were tag-teaming me, trying to guilt me into folding. Like I was some heartless monster for having clear, basic boundaries. Things escalated from there. Marisol started saying if the kids grow up resentful, it'll all be because I didn't care enough to support the vision of their blended family. I looked at her, stunned, and said, if that's really what you believe, then maybe you two need to take a long look at how you're handling things, not pin it all on me. By that point, a few people in the diner were glancing over at us. I didn't care. I was fed up, done being made out to be the villain for doing what any decent parent would do, standing up for his own kids. They wanted to twist everything, act like I had a moral obligation to fund whatever came up for every single kid in their home just because they blended their families. I finally stood up and said, I've said what I needed to say. My priority is my twins, and that's not changing. If you want everything to be equal, maybe start by looking in your own house instead of pointing fingers at mine. But I'm done playing the villain in your story. And with that, I walked out. As I left, I could feel them both watching me like they were still waiting for me to cave in and say, okay, fine. But I was done. I'd drawn my line in the sand and there was no turning back. Look, I get wanting the kids to feel like one big family. I really do. But expecting me to bankroll it? That's where the line is. Anyway, I thought after that train wreck of a conversation at the diner, things might finally settle down. Maybe they get the hint and just move on. But nope. Should have known better. Instead of cooling off, things escalated. A few days later, I started getting these long, drawn-out texts from her family, no less. It started with her sister. Now, this woman's usually stayed out of our drama. Real mellow type. But out of nowhere, she's in my messages talking about how it's so important for the kids to feel like they're one big, happy unit. She starts dropping lines like, if you really loved your kids, you'd be willing to do this for them. Like somehow saying no to paying for her sister's stepkids means I don't love my own children? At first, I ignored it. Thought maybe she just needed to vent and would let it go. But nope. The texts kept coming and they only got nastier. The tone shifted from suggestions to straight-up accusations. Suddenly, I'm cheap, selfish, and short-sighted. They made it sound like I was tearing apart some magical storybook family because I didn't want to fund a museum trip for a couple of kids that weren't mine. Like I was the villain in some made-for-TV drama. And then? It escalated again. This time, Marisol's mom calls me. Now, I haven't heard from her in a good while, so when I saw her name on my phone, I figured maybe, just maybe, she was calling to talk calmly about the twins. But man, was I wrong. She didn't even say hello, just jumped straight into this full-blown speech about how I needed to do more for the whole family. She told me flat out if you just pay for all the kids, none of this would be an issue. Then she added something about how much better things could be if I was more involved in the lives of all the children. I could feel my patience wearing thin fast. I replied as respectfully as I could, with all due respect, those other kids aren't my responsibility. I'm doing what's right by my own children, that's what I signed up for. But she didn't stop. She kept piling it on, saying things like, a real man steps up for the whole family, not just his biological kids. I was floored. I tried to explain it as plainly as possible that just because I wanted the best for my twins didn't mean I had to foot the bill for every child her daughter and her husband brought into their home. I told her I'm not going to feel guilty for setting limits and taking care of my kids. But it felt like she wasn't even hearing a word I said. The conversation just spiraled from there. She kept repeating herself about how it was my duty as a father, how the children would be the ones who'd suffer in the long run. And of course, she leaned hard on the guilt, trying to twist my boundaries into some kind of moral failure. By the end of the call, I'd had enough. I told her we clearly weren't going to see eye to eye and wrapped it up as politely as I could. But it didn't end there. Over the next week or so, it felt like they were organizing a full-blown family campaign against me. Out of nowhere, Marisol's brother dropped a comment on one of my social media posts, one of those simple dad moment photos I'd shared. He wrote, real dads support their whole family no matter what. The passive aggression was thick enough to choke on. It was obvious that little jab wasn't just about my twins. I didn't respond. I just deleted the comment and kept it moving. But I won't pretend it didn't get under my skin. Here I was, doing everything I could for my kids, and suddenly I was being cast as the villain in their family drama. One day, when I was dropping the twins off at Marisol's place, her husband came out and caught me before I could even get in my car. No, hello, no, how's it going? He went straight for it. You know you're hurting the kids with this, he said. I blinked. I honestly thought we'd already talked this out, but clearly he wasn't done. He started going on about how my refusal to pay for the other kids was driving a wedge between the siblings and how I needed to be more thoughtful about the family dynamic. I said, look, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm taking care of my kids. They're not the ones who are upset here. But he wouldn't back down. He just kept at it, telling me how everyone in their circle thought I was being unfair, how the kids would pick up on it, and how it was only a matter of time before resentment built up between them. It felt like he was trying to dump the entire emotional weight of their household onto my shoulders. I looked him in the eye and said, "Your family's opinion doesn't change the facts. I'm not their dad. I'm responsible for my twins, and that's not going to change." Honestly, I was running out of things to say. No matter how clearly I explained it, they just kept trying to twist things, trying to cast me as some cold, selfish guy who didn't care about unity or family. That night, I sat alone wondering how the hell things got this out of hand. All I ever wanted was to give my kids good experiences. I didn't sign up for this soap opera where I'm the bad guy for doing what a father's supposed to do. I vented to a couple of close friends, and even they were stunned at the pressure I was getting. One of them even joked, if they care so much about those other kids missing the trip, why don't they all chip in and pay for it themselves? It made me laugh, but it also made me realize how ridiculous this had all become. It felt like Marisol's whole family had decided I owed them something, and they weren't going to stop until I caved. By the end of that week, I knew I had to draw a firm line in the sand. They didn't want answers, they wanted compliance. They didn't care what my reasons were. They just wanted me to fall in line with their idea of one big happy family. But I wasn't about to let them wear me down. My kids are my priority. That hasn't changed and never will. And I wasn't going to let an entire family's guilt campaign push me into a role I never agreed to. It's wild to think that all of this started because I paid for a school trip. And yet here I was, smack in the middle of a family standoff, all because I refused to play dad to every kid under her roof. They might not like it, but I knew where I stood. After a week of nonstop texts, calls, and backhanded advice, I realized I had to make things crystal clear. No wiggle room, no soft edges. So that's what I did. First, I sat down with my twins to talk about the trip. I wanted to make sure they were still excited and didn't feel weird about going. After all the drama, I didn't want them feeling guilty or responsible for any of it. I kept it simple. I told them, "Hey, I'm really excited about this trip for you too. This is something special just for you." I didn't dump the drama on them, of course. But I wanted them to feel safe and supported, that it was okay for them to enjoy something just for themselves. They seemed relieved. Kids always pick up on tension. But they were smiling, clearly excited, and didn't seem weighed down by any of it. That was a huge relief. They needed to know it's okay to have good things without carrying everyone else's baggage. With that part settled, I knew it was time to set a proper boundary with Marisol and her family. Not just a casual, "I'm only paying for my kids" message, but a firm, final, "this is it" kind of boundary. So I picked up the phone and called her. I kept my tone calm and matter-of-fact. I didn't want to drag things into another endless debate. I said, "Listen, my role as a parent is to support my twins. That's what I'm focused on. I'm doing what I can to give them good experiences. But that responsibility doesn't extend to kids who aren't mine." I told her, "Look, I respect your life and the family you've built. But when it comes to finances, my obligation starts and ends with our twins." Unsurprisingly, Marisol didn't take it well. She jumped right back into how unfair it would be for the kids to have different experiences, how the other children would feel left out. I let her speak, but as soon as she started throwing guilt my way again, I cut in. I said, "I hear you, but this is my final call. I'm not paying for anything beyond what our twins need." I made it clear, if she needed to figure something out for the rest of her household, that was on her. I wasn't going to keep carrying weight that didn't belong on my shoulders. There was a long pause. I could almost feel her fuming on the other end of the line. I could tell she was trying to come up with one last plea to change my mind. But maybe she realized I wasn't budging. All she said was, "Fine. I guess you've made your choice." In that guilt-soaked tone meant to sting. But it didn't sting. If anything, I felt lighter. I was done explaining myself, done defending my role as a father. After that, the noise stopped. Her family stopped messaging me. No more shady comments. Just silence. Yeah, it was awkward, but it was peaceful too. And for once, it felt like they finally accepted the fact that I wasn't going to cave. That I'd drawn my line, and they'd have to learn to live with it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I made a point of spending more time with the twins. Nothing extravagant, just normal stuff. We grabbed burgers, went to the park, watched some old movies together. I wanted things to feel steady and relaxed for them, like the tension from the adults wasn't trickling down. And honestly, it was refreshing. Just me and my kids, no drama, no expectations. Just us. Then the big day came. I dropped them off at school that morning, and they were beaming, backpacks on, ready to go. Watching them laugh and run off with their friends, excited for the trip, gave me this deep feeling of peace. Like, yeah, this is what all that effort was for. It wasn't about making everyone happy or trying to win approval from people who didn't respect my boundaries. It was about doing right by my kids, giving them good memories, solid values, and a dad they could count on. And just when I thought it was over, the unexpected happened. The day after the trip, I got a call from Marisol. I braced myself for a snide comment or some fresh complaint, but she surprised me. She asked how the trip went, if the twins had fun. I told her they did, kept it short, didn't want to invite another debate. But then she caught me off guard again. She said, "I didn't agree with your decision, but I respect that you stood your ground. You did what you felt was right." And I'll be honest, I didn't know what to say. I never expected her to say that. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it felt like she was acknowledging that I wasn't the bad guy after all. Since then, things have been calmer. No more guilt trips. No backhanded remarks. It's like we finally reached a place where we understand each other, even if we still don't see eye to eye. And honestly, that's enough. I found it easier to focus on my kids without constantly second-guessing how it's going to play out with her side of the family. I'm just being a dad to my twins. That's where my energy goes. This whole mess taught me something I didn't expect. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others, it's also about saying yes to your own peace of mind. I've learned that it's okay to prioritize the people you're truly responsible for and not carry guilt for things outside your control. And if others don't get it, that's not my problem. So yeah, things are finally in a good place. My kids are happy, I'm happy, and we've moved past the noise. I've drawn my line, and even Marisol and her husband seem to have come to terms with it. It's not perfect. I know there'll be bumps ahead, but at least now I know I can stand my ground when it matters most. But just when I thought the dust had settled, a few weeks go by and then Marisol hits me with a brand new request, one that truly blindsided me. She starts talking about the living conditions at her place. At first, I thought she was just venting. But then I realized she wasn't just complaining, she was leading into something. She wanted me to buy them a house. Yeah, not for me. Not even for the twins. She wanted me to buy her and her family a bigger home, on my dime. Her reasoning? She said the twins shouldn't have to bounce between two completely different living standards. That it might hurt their confidence seeing such a stark contrast between our homes. I sat there for a moment, trying to process the fact that she was dead serious. She wanted me to buy a second house for her and the rest of her blended family so my twins would feel equal on both ends. I did my best to stay calm, but I had to ask, how is that my responsibility? You already have a house. She told me it was too small for their growing family, that it was negatively impacting the kids, that I should care enough to create a balanced environment. And once again, she pulled out the emotional pressure. She said, "Don't you want the kids to feel just as comfortable at my place as they do at yours? Isn't it unfair that you're not helping them feel fully at home?" I couldn't believe it. I told her, the twins have what they need at your place. If you believe they need a larger home, then that's something you and your husband should be working on together. I'm not buying you a new lifestyle. She went silent for a beat. Then she snapped back, "Well, if the kids grow up feeling like their only real home is with you, that's on you." I just shook my head. That was the end of that conversation. I still don't know how she thought any of that was even remotely reasonable. I mean, I want what's best for my kids, absolutely, but that doesn't mean I'm funding someone else's dream life. There might be no end to what she's willing to ask for, but at least now I know exactly where I stand. And I'm not budging.